and welcome to our Business Leaders Luncheon that we're calling our Legislative Wrap-Up, a forum where policy and business intersect. First, I would like to say thank you to our presenting sponsors, Aero Sanitary Service, Umpqua Bank, the Boeing Company, and Mount Hood Community College. Thank you to our stakeholder sponsor, Gresham Barlow School District, our venue sponsor, the Quality Inn, and our media sponsor, MetroEast Community Media. Thank you, Keith, for getting us set up and ready for a great presentation, and thank you guys for all of your support. I also would like to acknowledge our board members that we have in attendance. We have President Brian York, past President Leslie Parker, Dr. Lisa Scari, Alex Marcus, and Nina Vetter. And we do have we have an elected official in here. We have our Sandy Mayor, Stan Pulliam. Yeah, I'm sorry. Hi, Stan. It's an honor to have you all here today as we learn more about the impact of recent legislative actions, whether they've succeeded or faced challenges, and how they've reverberated through our businesses and industries. We're privileged to be joined by two outstanding individuals. There were three. I would like to say that Senator Bottom just called me and he double booked, so he won't be here. But we have individuals who have been at the forefront of shaping Oregon's legislative landscape. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Senator Gorsek and Representative Ruiz. Senator Gorsek represents us in District 25, and he's well known for focusing on issues related to education, transportation, and economic development. He's worked on legislation aimed at improving education opportunities for Oregon students and addressing transportation infrastructure needs. Through his dedicated efforts, he has advocated for legislation and that has the potential to create lasting positive change in our state. Representative Ruiz represents us in District 50, and he's one of the youngest state legislators in the state of Oregon. And he joins us today to share his perspective on the effects of recent legislative proposals, whether they have reached fruition or encountered roadblocks. We eagerly anticipate his insights on how these discussions have shaped his perspective on future legislation. Some of Ricki's commitments and priorities focus on education, housing, immigration, climate, and the economy. I'll say a little bit about Senator Bonham, even though he's not here. He does represent us in District 26, and he focuses on issues such as rural economic development, education, natural resources, and small business growth. So we're sad not to have him here with us today, but we should get a lot of information from these lovely gentlemen. The decisions made by our lawmakers have a profound influence on our economic landscape, our workforces, and the future prosperity of our state. Today, we have the privilege to gain insight into how these legislative actions have affected our lives and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. After our speakers have presented, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. I'll walk around with a microphone, so please hold all of your questions until then. We do have the pads and paper to take notes on. Thank you to Umpqua Bank. So without further ado, it's time to hear from our elected leadership with Senator Gorsek starting us off.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
Hopefully you're staying cool.
Yes.
Oh, man. I grew up in Portland, so I'm not a heat fan, so it's been a little difficult for me and for a lot of folks, especially if you're not housed and you're having to already try and survive on the street, and then we have all of the heat issues. In many ways, it's just as bad as the wintertime when it gets very, very, very cold. So at the state, we've been trying to work on things that will help with the unhoused, and we still, unfortunately, have quite a long ways to go. However, I actually come from Mount Hood Community College. In fact, I saw Dr. Scari. There she is. I've been teaching there since about 1996. It seems like maybe just 2 or 3 years ago, but you know how the time kind of whooshes past you. So I've taught there dealing with all sorts of things on the geography side. There's a lot of culture and environmental things. And then I teach criminal justice as well. My undergrad is from University of Oregon, and then my master's is from there, but my PhD is from Portland State, and it was urban studies. And urban studies is a lot like geography. If you kind of want to throw everything into one category and just say, oh, look, it's all about life, that's what urban studies and geography is, because I could never settle, right, on one particular topic. So I have had a wonderful time then teaching at Mount Hood and teaching all of these wonderful students who are coming up through the educational system, and hopefully creating not only some good citizens but also some compassionate and caring law enforcement officers, which is an important thing from my perspective. I once was a Portland police officer. I see a former Multnomah County Sheriff's officer, or I should say deputy, sorry. And what's that? I'm forgetting? Okay, thank you. And as we've seen over the last several years, the importance of having good, solid law enforcement and officers who are kind and caring and compassionate is extremely important. Now, the problem, of course, is there are people in our society who think you can do away with the police, and I think we've seen what happens when we do that. If you look at the city of Portland, my old agency was the Portland Police Bureau. It's kind of sad to see what happens, and so we have a long ways to go. It's important to hold police accountable, but also to support the police. My biased opinion. I do have a bill that I've been working on about more police accountability. Unfortunately, like so often happens, it didn't quite make it through the committee process. But, there's always next year. So we will continue working on that. I've done some other police accountability measures, especially around the interrogation of juveniles and trying to keep us from wrongfully convicting kids. If you've seen some of the things that have happened in other parts of the country, if you think about the Central Park Five, for instance, in New York City, where they confessed to something they had not done, we solve nothing when we do that, right? First, we ruin the lives of these young children that didn't commit the crime. And then what's the bigger problem besides that for society? The bad guys are still out there. And this guy, in that particular case, continued to do things that he should not have done. So, at any rate, what we do, though, and I think a lot of times people focus so much on the session, but actually what we do has a lot to do with what we do when we're not in Salem. And so what I mean by that is that both myself, Representative Ruiz, and others in Salem, we work on constituent issues a lot during the interim. And so if you have a state problem, we're the people that you should come to, whether it's the Senate or the House of Representatives. If it's a federal issue, of course, then you have the whole federal apparatus, including Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden. So there are lots of times when people come to us and they say, we've been dealing with this state agency and we can't get whatever it is taken care of. And oftentimes we're able to step in and help with that. And I have to tell you, that's actually very satisfying to be able to say, oh, this business or this individual is not being treated properly and we need to fix that. Now, we passed, believe it or not, we passed a bunch of bills last session. I know, everybody's like, yeah, sure you did. But we did. And actually, that's because after a long, what shall we call, a long hiatus, where we were unable to operate at the Senate level because we have an archaic system that says we have to have a quorum which most states, by the way, don't have the quorum. So we kind of came to a halt. I won't say a screeching halt because in Salem, that implies that we're really rolling down the track. I prefer to call it Snalem myself. But so what we had was a situation then where we had all these bills that had been heard in committee. A few of them had made it to the floor, but then we couldn't take it any further. Meanwhile, Representative Ruiz and all the people in the House are like, hello, we're still working. What's going on? What's going on? That lasted, what was it, 5 weeks?
6 weeks.
Yeah. And so when we finally got back to where we could run the bills, I don't know if you saw it, but we were running marathon sessions, and we waded through not every bill that had been proposed, but a good portion of them. And as I was just over in Eastern Oregon with Senator Findley talking about utilities and right-of-ways in a side committee that we have. Both he and I agreed and pointed out that most of the time the things that do make it to the floor, they're going to be bipartisan. And probably 90% of the time, I'm able to vote with my Republican, I'll say friends, because I have a lot of friends over there. Although somebody did ask me, I think it was Senator Bonham actually. He said the other day, how come you sit on the right side of the chamber? And I said, well, I like this seat. And he said, yeah, but look, you're surrounded by Republicans. And I'm like, yeah, I know. There's my friend, and there's my friend, there's my friend. I did say I was gentrifying the neighborhood, but that's a joke. Like Letterman used to say, it's just a joke. I know. But the point is, unlike what you see on the television, so often Ricki and I are, we're friends with people that philosophically are different from us, but the animosity that frequently is shown, that's a small part of what happens. And in truth, we need each other to solve the problems that we have in the state of Oregon. And I wish I could say we don't have a lot of problems, but actually we do. And so I had a personal problem on top of everything else, which was my heart decided that it should be clogged up right in the middle of my session, and while I was teaching too, by the way. And so I had to go in rather in an unscheduled sense and have a triple bypass. By the way, that's not the way to lose weight. Don't do it. But I had very good care. By the way, I also blame the Senate president because I've never served on health care. And I was assigned to health care committee this time. What happens? I end up in the hospital. So I told everybody that I was doing research for the committee. I will say Providence, St. Vincent, awesome. The surgeons, the nurses, the staff, if you can have a wonderful experience from a 9-day stay in a hospital, it was really impressive. But that meant I was out for a little while. And even as Senator Knopp, who's the minority leader, pointed out, he said, Chris, we helped you. Look at all these bills you got to vote on because we weren't there. I hardly think you were doing that for me, but thank you for thinking of me. So I did get to vote on most things. The other thing that was great is we, in my staff, we had already been working on a lot of bills from the very beginning. And so we were able to pass a whole bunch of things in my office. I had one that we recognized a former Portland police officer that I had worked with many years ago, Commander Mike Garvey, who passed away recently because of cancer. And so we were able to do a memorial for him. We also recognized John and Shirley Vandermosten. Do people know the Vandermostens? They're pretty active out here. They've done a lot of volunteer work out in East County, and so we were able to recognize them. We also, whoa, well, there you go. That was it. That was a mic drop. Okay, I'm done. We also had a situation where my staff discovered that some state boards and commissions were actually not making their videos from their meetings available online after the meeting. So if you didn't see it, if you didn't tune in at the moment, you couldn't. It was very hard to get the information. So we passed a bill that said, no, you have to post those so that people can see them, which is, that's the transparency issue for sure. And it's important for people, for voters, to be able to see what's going on and what people are doing. I am working on a bunch of things related to passenger and freight rail. We got one bill passed on this. We will do more. And being on the department, being on the transportation committee, I'm the co-chair of that committee with Susan McLean from the House side. We're working on a lot of things related to both highways, freeways, but also rail issues. I think that if you really want to move commerce, you have to think about all of those things. And many times, if it's long distance, frequently the more environmental option is to be able to run it on a train and then have trucks at the end points of these operations. And of course, we know that the interstate bridge is a big problem. Even though I wasn't there, I was able to continue to advocate for that funding, which we finally got. The interstate bridge, I'm sure you all know what the interstate bridge is like. I think the original span, the west span, is from 1917. And the other span, the east span, I think is from 58. So they're a little bit old. And it turns out that when you look at that bridge and it looks like it's got these big solid concrete supports that go, you think, all the way down into the base of the river, they actually don't. They're sitting on top of wooden pilings, and the pilings don't go to the bedrock. I wonder, back in 1917, I guess it was, it's close enough. It's like that commercial about, it's close, and not good. And so that's why it's particularly a problem if we end up having even a moderate earthquake event, because if the silt down there begins to shake up and liquefy, the bridge supports will be gone. Also, you don't want to break down on that bridge. There are no shoulders. There's no place to go. So I know there are some people who don't like the I-5 bridge situation, but I think it's the best option out of what we could get. There are people that want a tunnel, but apparently that would cost much more than the bridge. I don't know. I mean, we rely on engineers for these assessments, but we know definitely if you're concerned about commerce and safety, in the Portland metropolitan area, it's that bridge. We're also, that's the West Coast link up and down Interstate 5. And so if you're in Portland, but if you're in Eastern Oregon, if you're in Southern Oregon, a lot of people, especially agricultural and industrial folks, rely on that bridge to be able to get their commerce up and down. So it's not just about us, it's about that collective West Coast. So I'm continuing to work on that. And we've done a number of things. We did a bill that helped with property taxes related to floating homes. We also got a bill passed to require schools to educate kids about fentanyl. It's kind of sad that we have to actually mandate that, but we did get that out there. And the problem, of course, with fentanyl is that you don't have to have much contact to be impacted by that drug. And sometimes kids don't even know what it is. They think it's something else, and it's fentanyl. So that was nice to get that passed, I think. Also, did you know people make fake airbags? I know. So the auto industry came to us a couple of years ago and said there's a bunch of counterfeit airbags on the market. And sometimes it's just filled with like plastic garbage bags from the store. Sometimes, though, it has projectiles in them. And you don't want a bunch of nuts and bolts in an airbag. When you get in a wreck, you've crashed, and then it deploys all of these things into your body. Sometimes it shocks me what people do for a buck, but we did get this passed. This was Senate Bill 256, and basically prohibits the sale of dangerous counterfeit car parts. And finally, you probably know about people that like to race their cars on the street, which to my mind is a huge quality of life problem. Also, having been a police officer, it kind of just strikes me as a serious problem. Can you imagine, hopefully nobody's experienced this, but you're just trying to drive to your home in your neighborhood, and then you can't get there because an intersection's blocked and they're racing in circles and endangering people. So, it's Senate Bill 615. We've increased the punishments for street racing, and we have also elevated it after more than one. I think it's after more than one. You might be charged with a Class C felony instead of an A misdemeanor if you are arrested multiple times in a 5-year period. I believe also that if you've gone to court and been found guilty, the court may seize your vehicle, which it's kind of like taking a kid's toy away. In many cases, it appears that taking people's cars that they race around in is actually more painful than a fine. So, but our main goal is let's have places where they can go, but not city streets. And one of the things that I think we've so often forgotten is the impacts of many of these problems on commerce, on livability. People are just trying to live in nice places and be taken care of by city and county services. So that's been some of the things that we've done, and I am going to just stop. I'm going to pretend the bell rang. Remember that in A Christmas Story? And the kid gets stuck, and he goes, "You can't leave me." And he says, "But the bell rang." So I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Listen, I feel like this podium was not built for people like me. Can you all see me? Can the camera see me? Yeah. I might need Senator Gorsek to lift me up here. Yeah. On seriousness, can you all see me? Yeah. Okay, good. Well, first and foremost, thank you all so much for being here today and taking time out of your day to have some good lunch with us and interact. But before I get started, I just want to quickly acknowledge Stacy. Where's Stacy? Stacy, you just got the position of being president of the Gresham Chamber of Commerce. So I just wanted to recognize you for that great accomplishment, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And I know Dr. Lynn Snodgrass is not here. I don't see her, but I mean, shout out to her because she really carried this chamber, and I mean, it's a testimony of her great work that all of you are here. Also, a testimony of Stacy's work that all of you are here, but. Just being involved with the chamber since 2015, I was just always so amazed with the level of organization and the level of commitment that Lynn had for Gresham businesses. So kudos to her. I also want to acknowledge briefly Dr. Lisa Scari, who is here today. She is celebrating 5 years with Mount Hood Community College, and so I wanted to acknowledge her as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Scari. And I'll get to this in a minute, but Dr. Scari was a true champion for community college resources, and if it wasn't for her guidance and her leadership, a lot of the stuff that I'm about to share wouldn't have happened. So thank you, Dr. Scari. And Senator Gorsek, thanks for being here. We would make a joke at the office because we're trying to live up the mood, or it's like, man, when is Senator Gorsek coming back from vacation? But I know how serious your condition was, and I'm just really thankful that you're even here today and you came back. You really stayed in the Capitol 12 hours voting left and right, and thanks for passing my bills, because we were scared our bills were not going to get through. So I just want to acknowledge you, Senator Gorsek, for being here and just continuing to be a champion for East Multnomah County. So thank you. So enough of them. Now it's about me. My name is Ricki Ruiz. I get the great honor of being a state representative to District 50, which covers the majority of Gresham and the small but mighty portion of East Portland. Honestly, it's a true honor to be representing some of you, if not all of you, in Salem. And coming out of this 2023 legislative session, I can say what a roller coaster of a ride it was. But we're here to tell the story. To provide a little bit of an insight of what my days look like in Salem, I serve as the Vice Chair of the House Committee on Higher Education, where I prioritize ensuring our state's post-secondary institutions like Mount Hood Community College remain accessible and adapt to the needs of our students. I also serve in the House Committee of Economic Development and Small Business. I was asked earlier by my neighbors in the table, what's my business? Like, my business is consuming your businesses. And I don't own a business, and that's okay. But I love to consume, and I think the consumer's perspective in small business and economic development is as critical as it ever will be. I also serve in other committees. I serve in the Education, Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that decides where the money goes in regards to education. And I am one of the chairs for the Oregon BIPOC Caucus, which is made out of 17 legislators of color from the Senate to the House, covering Gresham, Portland, Hillsborough, Aloha, you name it. And it is the biggest class that has ever been elected in the Oregon legislature. So navigating 17 people is sometimes really easy, sometimes really hard, but that's the beauty of democracy. We all have opinions, and we all get to respect them. So, as I said, this legislative session was a unique one, to say the least. Even in conversations with some of our veteran legislators, and hearing that this was the different session was an understatement. This was honestly sometimes an uphill battle, but also that uphill battle was worth it because there was a lot of wins that came out of this session. One of the ones that I'm really excited to share with you all is we were able to continue to build off of a $2 million investment for the 2021 session and 2022, which is a $2 million investment for the East Multnomah Outreach Prevention and Intervention Program, which we thankfully got it funded again for this biennium. So you might be thinking, what is that program? In short, we call it a MOPI. No, it's not a Pokemon. It's just what it is called. And it came to us from the city of Gresham, and is a community-oriented approach to addressing the root causes of community violence, in particular our youth. By providing ongoing outreach, investments, and services, we can together strengthen youth resilience and prevent gang involvement, violence, and crime. The MOPI is modeled on evidence-based best practices and is a comprehensive approach to providing support to at-risk Gresham youth, which we'll already see in the benefits of that. And I just want to acknowledge City of Gresham's leadership on this important investment, Gresham Police Department, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, and the multiple number of organizations that have stayed committed to the effort of reducing violence among our youth in Gresham and East Multnomah County. As we emerge from the pandemic, one phrase repeatedly sticks with me. COVID was hard for everyone, but worse for some. We continue to see the negative impacts of distance learning and have seen our students that take a big hit in the comprehension of reading, math, and writing. This is obviously concerning, but bold and innovative actions are needed. I was proud to help pass a $10.2 billion investment in a state school fund, which is $700 million above current service level and the most ever allocated to the fund. When we paired with local property tax revenue, the total formula for resources for K-12 schools reaches $15.3 billion, a 12.3% increase over current resources, which will ensure Oregon schools and educators will have the tools they need to prepare Oregon students for the future. A $140 million investment in early literacy, which will prioritize reading and writing proficiency for elementary school students, was also invested. On the higher education side, I helped pass House Bill 5025, which invested $3.7 billion to ensure Oregonians seeking post-secondary education obtain a high-quality education. This funding includes $1 billion for Public University Support Fund and $800 million for the Community College Support Fund, $308.4 million for the Oregon Opportunity Grant, and $24.2 million to the Tribal Students Program Grant. I also voted in favor of our educator workforce so they can have the tools they need to succeed. An example is Senate Bill 523B, which allows Oregon community colleges to now soon offer Bachelor's of Science in Nursing degrees. That's a big win for community colleges. And when talking to students, a lot of this, especially during COVID, a lot of students had the passion and the idea of wanting to become nurses. And one of the biggest concerns they had is leaving home, going to a public university. Now with this bill, they can stay local, they can stay home and get their bachelor's degree on something they want to accomplish. And that for us is a big win. So props to our community college champions, including Dr. Scari, for making that happen. As I mentioned before, forming part of the Economic Development and Small Business Committee not only allowed me to learn more about those specific roles and topics, but it also allowed me to work on a handful of bills that had bipartisan and bicameral support. And here's some, to name a few. Senate Bill 643, which modified provisions relating to sales of home goods, allowing those home goods to be sold to small coffee shops or restaurants. House Bill 3466, relating to poverty reduction planning for Oregon cities in partnership with Oregon Business Development Department. This bill did not make it through, but we're hoping to bring it back in 2024, and it has the support of the League of Oregon Cities and multiple legislatures across the state. House Bill 3286 would have extended the sunsets of certain programs providing economic incentives, which we didn't get through the finish line this session. Just earlier this week, I was talking to some officials from Washington and comparing the economic development incentives that Washington offers compared to Oregon is quite frankly embarrassing for us. We have to step up when it comes to the incentive package of attracting businesses, attracting corporations, because those are the corporations, those are the businesses that are offering jobs to a college student, to a person like myself. And so one of the things that we're looking into this interim is being able to figure out how we can match to Washington, how we can get close to California, how we can get close to Nevada, and ensuring that we're attracting those businesses to come to Oregon. So that is a critical component of that committee. The next bill is House Bill 3250, which would have established a task force in sports with the goal of growing business in athletics, team sports, outdoor activities, and recreation ecosystem. This was a bill that was chief sponsored by Representative Bynum. Again, didn't get to the finish line, but when you look at business opportunities, you'll be surprised. Sports is one of those avenues to bring more businesses to Oregon. And one bill that we did get through the finish line was Senate Bill 4, which is the CHIPS Act, which was an investment of over $300 million on semiconductor work. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a big win, and it was an early win for us in session. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Microchip, thank Mount Hood Community College in their efforts and making sure that that money was going to get secured for Oregon businesses and Oregon semiconductor businesses. A lot of the things that I heard from the community is that public safety was an issue of concern. I listened and I advocated in Salem. You deserve to feel safe in our communities, and I am proud to have supported legislation that investment in law enforcement agencies, hold bad actors accountable, prevent gun violence, and provide the victims with resources and funds, community programs proven to prevent crime, such as SMOPI, and keep us safe. I also supported increases in penalties for possession of fentanyl to keep our streets safe. In addition, I am proud to have worked with both of the, I would say both of these senators, but there's only one right now, but with Senator Gorsek, in passing the Emergency Notification Act, which requires school districts to notify parents, guardians, and school staff of any threat or school safety issues, such as lockdowns. This bill came from parents in my district and parents in the Portland district who were left wanting answers regarding a recent school lockdown. A lack of housing supply, high interest rates, drives the homelessness crisis and strains working families. It's made it near impossible to purchase a home now, and I've heard from many of who have expressed fears of being priced out of the communities they call home. I supported major investments to build more homes and preserve affordable housing, along with protections to stabilize rents and increase access to home ownership. I also supported critical programs that will that will get unhoused communities off the streets, connected to services, and into stable housing. I hope to see accountability measures and make sure that our tax dollars are being spent wisely. Other than vacations during this interim, I also have plans to get prepared for the 2024 legislative session. It's fitting that we're in Quality Inn, beautiful location. We were just talking with Senator Gorsek, because my motto is quality over quantity. While we see less bills introduced, I want to be intentional on my policies that come before me or get introduced. In the upcoming months, I will be meeting with our law enforcement agencies, fire districts, fire departments, and other first responders to see how they can be better supported in Salem. I hope to meet with all of you, either individually or in a roundtable method, where I can hear from you and learn how I can best advocate for your needs. It is imperative that any solution towards addressing the barriers our business owners face must come through a collaboration between all of us. I like to bring the Committee on Economic Development Small Businesses and invite you all to set a long-term plan in uplifting your voices and the blueprint towards healthy collaboration. And I would hate myself for not mentioning this, but a lot of the things that we shared were state initiatives, state things, but one local thing that we helped address in partnership with Senator Gorsek's office and Mayor Stan Pulliam, who's here as well, was addressing the Mount Hood Legacy Birthing Center situation. And I can say that I'm confident that with our collective work, not seeing who was Democrat, not seeing who was Republican, not seeing who was 5'4" like me or 6 foot like Senator Gorsek, we came together to challenge Legacy, letting them know that closing the birthing center was a horrible idea. And just a couple weeks ago, I think they announced that they reopened the birthing center, and there's our local families, our local mothers are giving birth to this day. So I just wanted to acknowledge that part. A lot of our efforts are indeed state-focused issues, but local issues are as critical as ever as well. So I will also pretend there was a little ring and my time is up, but I'm here to answer any questions. Hopefully next time, Stacey, you get me a little stepping stool so I can look better. But quite frankly, I really do invite all of you, once we're back in session in 2024, to come out to Salem. Come and learn what a committee is all about. Learn about the legislative process, and you can see your idea become a law if you give time. That's pretty much it. So thank you all so much. I will be here to answer any questions, and I hope to come back soon.
Thank you. If Representative Ruiz and Senator Gorsek don't mind standing up at the front, I'll walk around with the microphone for Q&A. So anybody that has a question for either of these gentlemen, let me know. Miss Leslie.
So there was a mention of additional money for education. Mm-hmm. So can you may not know, but can you explain what that might look like in the classroom or in the schools for students or parents?
Yeah, well, thank you, Leslie, for your question. One good thing that we have in Oregon is we have school boards that make those decisions locally. The way I picture these additional funds is helping address class sizes, helping address more reading supports for students. If you look at how we're doing in regards to literature and early literacy, we're falling behind compared to other states in the state in this nation. So, my commitment and my hope and hopefully how it's going to deliver it is going to be directly focused on those schools and the school districts that are falling behind, so we can catch them up. But also being very critical with the fact that we also have to support those schools and classrooms that are just there, right? Because if we lose sight of what they're accomplishing, they're also going to fall behind, right? So I really hope our school districts, our school boards make wise decisions in investing those dollars, additional dollars, to the areas that they see most fit.
And on a side note, another Mount Hood person has just shown up a while back. So I'd like to recognize Diane McKeel, who's on the board of directors, and also Shatoya. So it's nice to see those folks here as well. And Ricki is very right about the school board issue. You know, there's a lot of times where we wrestle with, is this going to be a state mandate, or will it be something where local control takes over? And so with education, we have kind of general, broad sorts of ideas about what should be done and how it should be done. And yet we also frequently leave it up to the school board. Unfortunately, that hadn't worked out very well. If you know Senator Gelser, who is very much into education for everyone, and really focuses on the really the disabled students. During COVID, they were not getting hardly any instruction, and several times she and others of us tried to make the point to the Department of Education that you're not even following the law. And so we did get her bill passed that mandates that sort of education happen for everybody, and you don't get to give them sometimes as little as a couple hours a week, which was really bad. So it's an interesting model that we have, but sometimes I think you have to say that's not okay.
Coming up front. Yes. There you go.
You can go first.
Okay, thank you. For Senator Gorsek.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there is a lot of legislation and sensitivity around youth being incarcerated and also being interrogated.
Right.
But I want to ask you about pregnant women and breastfeeding women and the system. Is there any information what's happening with them, shackling, not getting enough food,
Right.
et cetera? Thank you.
You know, you ask an important question, and there was, I think, a little more support for pregnant women at Coffee Creek. Coffee Creek is our one female prison. We need to do more when it comes to that. And one of the problems that happens right now is that if you're pregnant and you get sent to prison, pretty much as soon as you give birth, the baby's out of there. And I think we need to do more with more time for bonding, and we need to worry maybe perhaps a little less about shackling people when they're giving birth. I get corrections officers have to be careful, right? But at the other side of it, I think there are ways that we can do some of these things that are a little more compassionate.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I hope that we can continue to work on that.
It's my turn.
Yes.
Did my bell ring?
Yes, it did. Didn't you hear it? Oh.
I just did. This question is for either of you. In this funding that has just been victoriously acquired,
Yes.
Along the lines of education, is there an emphasis or progress in the area of CTE, career technical education? And does that also blend itself over into the Department of Corrections, where folks are expected to be corrected,
Right.
and allowing educational opportunities, particularly the trades, in those institutions?
Sure.
It was like those three questions in one, and we love those questions. There's no question, right? I think we need to look to further research, but also start implementing those ideas of like, how do we use the CTE programs that we have, which quite frankly we don't have enough, first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And how do we also implement that in the corrections facilities? Because one thing that I was talking to some of my colleagues in the floor when the Senate was in a little bit of a pause was figuring out how we can provide some educational resources for young men and women who are in corrections facilities that with the hope that they're going to come out with some sort of certification, ready to come out and join the workforce, right? Or ready to come out and finish a degree or finish their schools. And I think there's some of that kind of happening, but it's not in a way that we would wish was happening across the state. So, I mean, you look, when I was in school, when I was in middle school, I mean, I had opportunities to do metal workshop, sheet metal opportunities, woodwork, automotive. And now that's not the case, right? Not in many of our middle schools or even our high schools. So I think the CTE pathway, we have to go back in time and see like this. There's a reason why we have this many mechanics. There's a reason why we have these many sheet metal workers, is because a lot of those students that decided to pursue those careers, they made those decisions in high school, even in middle school. But now we're not providing those resources for our kids, they don't know about it until it's a little too late. So I'm interested to talk to you and figure out what we can come up with.
There's also a disconnect between juvenile corrections, which is the Oregon Youth Authority, and then the main correction system for adults, Department of Corrections. And what I find is that the director at OYA has continued a positive course in terms of working on having many of the things that Ricki was talking about. But that's for youth. And what we find for DOC, Department of Corrections, is that, maybe Columbia River has this program, but maybe Snake River does not, right? And so we don't have a system where we say, oh, at DOC, we do this and we do it for every institution. We should,
right?
But usually what we'll get is, well, that's too expensive and we can't afford that. Well, I mean, the question is, what are we trying to accomplish? I don't think having people, being there and doing meaningless jobs helps with rehabilitation. On the other hand, we have to also be aware of the fact that sometimes rehabilitation just doesn't happen. But you have to offer it, I think, my biased opinion, is that you have to offer it. And in many cases, it will be very meaningful. But to go and just base it on a dollar sign, which is unfortunately the budgets that we live within, it frequently is kind of the thing that we come back to. It's a great question, by the way.
What? There we go, Tom.
I'll keep my personal feelings under the table. Could you explain your position on any legislation that may be coming forward on gun control?
I have not, since we ended session, I've not heard about anything new. Have you? No. So at this point, Tom, I don't know.
Do you have a feeling as to what could be done?
Well, I would, I think part of it is, I think that, some things were dealt with, like ghost guns, which was really important. Unfortunately, as technologies improve, sometimes they improve in a negative way. And so people can 3D print these plastic guns that then you can't detect. So we've done some things to limit that. I think you will always see some sort of gun bills coming forward. I just don't know what they might look like at this point. How about you, Ricki?
Yeah, I share the same sentiment. I think tackling the ghost gun situation was honestly a much needed thing that we had to do. But who knows what could happen with technology in 5 to 10 years? We might be tackling something else. But one thing that I heard loud and clear, especially from my constituents, is please do not pass gun legislation that hurts responsible gun owners, right? And their voices need to be heard as well. And I think their ideas could be something that will benefit us as we start mulling what kind of laws we're going to try to pass in 24 and 25. So as of now, we haven't heard if there's anything coming forward for 24, but most certainly might be 25, because usually with a topic like this, it requires a long session.
Right. And the one thing to remember, you probably already know this, but we have, shall I say, a real session. We have a long session, every other year. And then we have a short session. The long session's about 5 months. The short session's 5 weeks. And we are all limited. I think in the Senate this time we'll be limited to 2 bills just because of the amount of time that we lack trying to get things through. Because, bills have to be introduced, they have to go to committee, they have to be, if they're approved by committee, then they go to the floor, and that has to happen in both chambers. So there's not a lot we can do in the short session. So that can also impact what we're able to do. I will say that, groups like Moms Demand Action, I'm sure that they will continue to have other ideas about, gun safety bills. And it is one of those things where we, on the Democrats and Republicans, we might agree on a lot of things. Usually that is a topic that can get us all kind of tied up. Yeah. Good question, by the way.
Did you have a question? And then we'll get to you, Brian.
Hi, my name is Teresa Peterson, and I want to thank both of you for your service to our state and our community. And I'm a real estate broker and a citizen of Gresham, and my husband is a business owner. And, in a post-COVID era, I think we've noticed there are a lot of businesses, small businesses, that unfortunately did not survive.
Yes.
And still many struggle. And my question is, and especially Representative Ruiz being on the Small Business Committee and Economic Development Committee, how can us in the community best collaborate and communicate with you both to encourage targeted investment in local small businesses?
Go ahead.
I'll take this one. Well, thank you so much for your service as well in our city. Honestly, it takes a conversation, right? I think I was being serious what I said earlier in my remarks. Having Gresham or East County representation to go to the Economic Development and Small Business Committee is critical, because I think that's only one of the few committees that allows public testimony during a committee hearing. And I think we did hear some remarks in regards to that from people in different parts of the state wanting a targeted investment. So I'm eager to hear your ideas. Hopefully, get us a roundtable, and more than happy to also organize a time for you all to come to the committee itself and share your thoughts and ideas, because we're lucky we have a really good chair, Representative Janelle Bynum, who is a small business owner herself as well, and I think she quite frankly understands the struggles of post-pandemic and is still struggling as well. And I think allowing that space to put you on official record to request resources that are targeted will be very critical.
And there's no reason that, especially during a long session, if we know about certain targeted requests, we can put those things into Ways and Means, the money people. The one thing I'll tell you is there's no problem asking. And we know that, it may not happen, but if you don't ask, we already know what that answer is. So I believe in asking early and often. And, one thing that Ricki and I and Zach Hudson over in 49 in Troutdale, we were able to actually get to allocate the federal monies that came through. It was the first time that I'd experienced it where our leadership said, oh, okay, well, here's this amount of money. What do you want to do with it? Yeah. Usually it has to go through the filter of Ways and Means, which I think that filter needs to be cleaned. Yeah. But that happened because people came and then they told us about different things, And so the sports complex, is it El Programa Hispano, right? And their facility that they're developing out on Stark. The basketball courts that we were at recently at Red Sunset, Shaw Woods, we were able to put money up so that the city of Gresham could hold on to those. And there were many more. So if we don't know about them, obviously we can't advocate for them. So please do. I know sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk to those people. I understand that. I don't even talk to myself. Right? But it's so important, and it's so important to ask, always ask. And we can't guarantee it's going to happen, but we certainly will advocate. And that's our job, right? Our job is to advocate for our districts. And Ricki and I have worked really hard to, bring good things to East County. The one thing, and we were just talking about this, the one thing to remember about Multnomah County, if you talk to some of my colleagues that are from Eastern and Southern Oregon, they go, "Oh, you have lots of money. You're in Multnomah County." I like the name, by the way. I'm very fond of Multnomah County, but it has an incorrect supposition attached to it, which is if you're in Multnomah County, you've got the cash. We know, according to a state economist, that there's a big difference between 82nd I-205 East and West. And if you split us, West would be the most affluent county in the state. And what about us? We would either be the last or the next to last poorest in the state. So one of the things that Ricki and Zach and Casey Jama, who's a senator to my west, we're always trying to let people understand there's a big difference, and there's plenty of things that East County has to offer, but frequently some of the essential services don't come here when they should. On the other hand, drive down Sandy Boulevard and you see all that industry that's out there, and you drive around the area around Hogan and Gleason. Well, if you're in Troutdale, you want to call it Cherry Park. It's not. It's Gleason. But I came from Portland. But that whole huge complex, it used to be a farm. All of that, a bunch of things in Gresham. I mean, there's a lot that we have to offer. But unfortunately, trying to get some of those things brought out here is hard.
Did you have a question, Brian?
Yes, I do.
Got one here.
This is kind of a jump ball for both of you, maybe leaning towards Senator Gorsek a bit. It has to do with affordable housing.
Yes.
By way of background, I've been on the board of Home Forward for about 10 years, still sit on the Real Estate and Development Committee. So I've seen the development of affordable housing evolve over quite a bit of time.
Right.
I've seen more and more capital resources created for affordable housing over the last 20 years. What I've also seen is that the problem has become worse. We have more and more people living on the street in terrible conditions. And a recent study showed that the cost of affordable housing unit in a multifamily structure is approaching $500,000. This is not an affordable housing level whatsoever. I've also been in the real estate and construction business for more years than I like to remember, but I know what the cost of these units are on a market rate basis today. A lot of this has to do with the regulatory environment, the time frames that it takes to get approvals, the capital stack requirements for prevailing wage. There's a multiplicity of things that push these costs beyond reasonableness.
Right.
What, if anything, is being done at any level? And I know the governor tried to expand the urban growth boundary, which would have provided more land and infrastructure for housing. I believe you voted against that, Senator Gorsek, but what if it...
literally one of those people on the middle of the yellow line. There were some reasons for
what can be done? What kind of dialogue is going on right now that could streamline this process and bring the cost of quote-unquote affordable housing into a reasonable range such that the supply side of this issue could catch up with the demand?
Well, one of the things I can tell you about that particular bill is coming late in the session, it didn't get the vetting that it needed. And there are some places that definitely needed that bill. Friend of mine, Dick Anderson, is a senator on the Central Coast. He'll tell you just how horrible it is to try and develop housing for workers. And if you go over to the beach, you've probably all seen it. Help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. So I have no doubt we need to do something. The good thing is discussions are continuing about how we might alter that bill to the point where we can get something passed in the short session. The one problem, though, that you bring up, most of the time what we hear is about numbers. Well, how many? And we don't hear so much about the discussion around regulation and all of those things that drive up the cost. And I think that's something that we need to approach the governor on and indicate that this needs to be part of that. I think, Metro didn't need that bill, right? I mean, Metro has done, they claimed that they didn't want the bill, but the Oregon Coast wanted that bill. So I'm glad to see that the Senate President, and I think also the Speaker of the House, that they're continuing to talk about it and work on ways that we can do something with that bill. The other thing is, in discussing this with the folks over at League of Conservation Voters and a few other groups that are in that area, it sounds like they too recognize the problem and want to work for a solution. So I don't think we're as much of an impasse as the vote would seem to indicate. But I think that it has to be a bigger discussion in terms of the things you're talking about, because it matters. And we see it all the time, people living on the street, which, it's terrible for them. And unfortunately, it also ends up being some really serious livability questions for the people that live in those neighborhoods as well. So it's really, talk about a double-edged sword. It's a big one. I'm sorry, Ricki, did you want to say?
You got that jump ball.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and I think Ms. Diane?
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks. Hi. Thanks for being here, and thanks for your support of community colleges, and in particular Mountain Community College. So as we look going forward, we talked a minute about the short session coming up.
Yeah.
And what do you see, at this point, what do you see coming up in the short session?
Well, I think you're going to see the attempt to deal with this land use question. And I think what you have to do, and we did pass something for Ontario where they did a land swap because they needed to be able to do some housing that was not in the growth boundary. And so I think we have to look at any of those things carefully, but there are things that we can make adjustments to. Now, I did not vote for the one that said, oh, and now we can build in wetlands. Well, I don't know that that's a good place to go. But imagine, so you're in Lincoln County, and you've got wetlands, you've got tsunami inundation zones, and you've got a growth boundary. I mean, you're really hemmed in. So I think that will be a big one. What do you think? What else?
One thing that I'm hearing, just because I'm in the education realm of things, is early childhood. I know with the $140 million that was invested in early literacy, there's going to be a conversation on whether that was enough money in the first place. And also, the early Department of Early Childhood just got a makeover. They're named DELC. I don't know what that stands for now. Division of Early whatever. And so one of the things that what happened is a lot of the transition that happened from one department to a new one, a lot of those funds didn't go through, which is something that already we're being lobbied around child care deserts, the pay for these workers as well. And just the available space that is currently there as well. So I think, agreeing with Senator Gorsek, I think the urban growth boundary issue is definitely going to come up. And at least in my side of the issues, early childhood education is going to be another big component as well.
And I can tell you, we're going to be carrying a bill in my office for the SEIU, the union, relating to the woman, the healthcare worker, the home healthcare worker that was killed by the person she was caring for. And so we're going to be pushing for more funding so that we never have a person working alone like that was going on that time. One of the problems is we have a lot of need for these home healthcare workers, and as some of us move up the age ladder, I know, Tom's like, not me. It's the coffee that keeps you young. But what we're finding is, the demographic is very obvious. We're going to need more and more and more folks to do this work, but it needs to be safe for them. And I have to tell you, it was quite shocking that this individual was working alone, and then it was more shocking that she ended up being killed. So that's one of the things that I will be focusing on with one of my 2 bills.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. A nice round of applause for Representative Ruiz and Senator Gorsek, please. I feel like we could have had a whole afternoon of this. This was actually really great. Lots of good questions. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And I hope you enjoyed lunch and your time and your ability to ask questions. I know they are always available if you have more. Remember, we are recording this. It will be available through the cable channels for MetroEast and the Chamber website if you'd like to rewatch or share with anybody that might be interested. And our Chamber calendar has our events coming up for next month. The next Business and Leaders Luncheons, we're still debating on topics, so check your calendars, but it should be September 19th. And I'd like to mention we still do have openings for our Leadership Academy, which is a very beneficial program for people in the workforce, for owners and employees alike. So please check that out or talk to Vicki, who's our program director, about that. And again, to thank our sponsors, Aerosanitary, Umpqua Bank, the Boeing Company, and Mount Hood Community College for presenting, and Gresham Barlow and Quality Inn and MetroEast community members, or community media, and then our member restaurant, Olive Garden, for delivering our lunch today. I hope everybody enjoyed that, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.